Coach, I appreciate you having me on. When I started, in all seriousness, I made that joke about Texas and Florida. I started seeing, one coach on there, then it kind of blew up or whatever. I'm humbled to be here. I know you didn't use these words, and I'm certainly not going to use these words, but I'll throw out there. I am not an expert or a guru at anything other than just being myself, and I firmly believe that if I were to press mute on my screen and just stop talking and listen to any of the coaches on here, there's no doubt in my mind I could learn something. So I truly am humbled to be here. Um, for the coaches that are here, I'm just going to kind of focus on talking here, and I'll let Coach kind of stop me and read any of the questions or share anything. Um, it's an interesting time for all of us. I'm here right now. This is my lunch break because I teach fourth grade full time in addition to coaching. So I've been calling all my families this morning and doing all that. And, how that ties in here is, our administration for where I teach. And I teach, unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but I teach and coach at two different districts. So that's not ideal. But, both those we coach and those we teach want to know that they're loved. So I'm just going to get started here. I appreciate you guys. But at any point, Justin, just interrupt me and let me know there's a question or something that needs clarification. Let's start with the whole point of this. We're all home right now or wherever we are because of something negative, because something, a trial or a tribulation, something challenging. And there are a lot of coaches out there that say the right thing, that put out the right message to the public. And then we all know we've coached with them or against them, or we've heard them, that behind closed doors, they're nothing what they say they are. And what first got me into when Coach asked me to speak on something, I said, what are you thinking? He said, what do you want? I said, well, let's talk about leadership. And once again, I'm not an expert at all, but I have coached high school football for 22 years, going on my 23rd, and I've been blessed to coach with some amazing men. My first job coaching, I coached with someone. I was a head freshman coach. I had no desire to even be on varsity yet. And I was coaching with a gentleman in Amherst, New Hampshire, who just loved the kids, knew football, but really taught me more about just transparently, selflessly loving people. And I've also coached with guys that you hear them speak and you're like, man, I can't believe this is happening right now. Like, how are they getting away with it? How can they sleep at night? And would they speak the same way to their own children? So I've seen the best of the best and the worst of the worst. My first calling into teaching was from leadership based on love. I was in a seventh grade math class, and math is not my strong suit by any stretch of the imagination. There's a reason I teach fourth grade. I can do fourth grade math. That's about it. But I had a seventh grade math teacher, Mr. Nick, who would sit on his desk at the beginning of every class and just talk to us, just about life. Nothing specific, just nothing related to math, but just about us. And at that age, at seventh grade, I remember thinking to myself, he cares. Like this guy really cares about us as human beings, not about me as being a math student. And that was the first time I ever thought about teaching. As far as coaching, the first time I ever thought about coaching, and some of you may have heard this before, but I was coaching I was a volunteer for a special needs flag football team. And, there was minimal X's and O's, but a lot of young men, a lot of young women who just had a joy for life and wanted to be there. And that was my first introduction into coaching, where I realized, as teachers, I think we have a captured audience. And I say captured, not captive, because by law, they have to be there. They have to be in class. Whether they're homeschooled or not, they have to be there. As coaches, we have a captive audience where if we do our job right, we can captivate and capture their hearts. But, we have a biased opinion, or at least I have a biased opinion. There are a lot of great sports out there, but I don't think there are many, if any, tougher than football. The rigor and the demands, especially as a player. So when we have that platform as coaches to not just win games, and I think everyone in here right now is competitive and loves to win and hates to lose, and we've all heard the different sayings about that. But I've heard way too many coaches talk about wanting to lead young men and help young men become better young men. And in the same breath, they joke about how they don't see their families for 4 months and the families are football widows and they don't see them. And I've seen too many failed marriages. It's heartbreaking because you see too many guys that joke about not taking a day off, no time off, no rest. I'll rest when I sleep, or I'll sleep when I die. And then they get divorced. And our young men not only see right through that, I think the coaches that brag about, whether it's intentional or not, not seeing their families, we're not really doing what we're saying we're trying to do as far as leading young men. So for me, leading with love, there's a lot of different ways we can do it. And I don't think there's one right way or better way. I think the best way to lead with love, as cliche as this may sound, I think the best way is just to be transparently ourselves. If I try to be like any of the coaches on here, I'm going to fail miserably because I'm not you, and I might be better, might with a capital MIGHT, be better than some of you at certain things, maybe, but there's no doubt in my mind that you guys are better than me at other things. So I think one of the greatest things we can do as coaches when we go to lead with love is be ourselves. Because the world is overpopulated with people who, whether it's social media or not, and I think it was around before even social media, but we see other people post and highlight films or how they coach, and I think it's fine to borrow and adapt and take some things we learn. That's what life's all about, helping each other. That's what you're doing here, Justin, which is an amazing service to all of us. But I think we kind of lose a little bit of ourselves, or a lot of ourselves, when we try to be like other coaches. And our players don't want or need us to be like any other coach. They need the best Coach Hines or the best Coach Weaver, Coach K, Coach Wilson, Coach Kellen, any of us. They need us to be us, And at the same time, when we lead with love, we need them, or they need us to love them for who they are. I'm not sure how many of the coaches on here have read. One of my favorite coaching books that I've read is Inside Out Coaching by Joe Ehrmann. And real brief history here. Joe Ehrmann was a lacrosse and football player back in the 60s, I believe. Grew up at East Coast, played at Syracuse. There's no Hall of Fame there for both sports. Ended up going on to, I think, a 14-year career in the NFL with the Colts. But he talks about, and this is his wisdom, not mine, but he talks about how every coach is either transactional, where I might pour into a young man because I can get something from him, kind of like a bank transaction, or they're transformational. We're going to pour into the studs just as much as we pour into, Timmy, who can't put his helmet on straight and his cleats are always untied or whatever. And once again, that's Joe Ehrmann's Inside Out Coaching. If you haven't checked that book out, but our players need us to love them for who they are and where they are. How many times have we, and I'm guilty as the next guy, we see a freshman or a sophomore come into our program and we, not in front of them, but we're like, man, I don't know about that one. He's going to be a project. And sure enough, a year or two or three later, that kid's one of the best in the team, athletically and as far as leadership and everything. It doesn't happen overnight. There's no magic to it. They've got to do their part, and we understand the coaching of the sport, and the off-season strength and conditioning and academics and fueling their bodies. But I think that one of the greatest things we can do is look at a young man square in the eye, and some coaches aren't comfortable using this word. When I was a head coach in New Hampshire, I loved my staff, our staff, but I had some coaches that would go off on kids, go off on them. Tough love was their justification. And I would pull the coach aside afterwards and say, hey, listen, I don't mind if you go off on them. We have no swearing policy, so don't use foul language. But I don't mind if you go off on them. But before you leave that field, if you go off on them on one practice, don't you dare leave that field without putting your arm around them and saying, hey, I love you, and having that conversation. And I had one coach say to me, he's a great friend of mine now, he goes, Coach, I'm not going to tell the kids I love them. And it was mind-blowing to me. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm not going to use those words with a player. I'm like, man, someday when you have your own son, you will. You'll get it, And I said, well, great, don't use those words. Use whatever words you're comfortable with, but you better pour into them twice as much as you tear them down. And it's been amazing over the years to see, him transform and grow. But I think there's beauty and power when our players, just like my math teacher did with me, he wasn't having conversations with me because I was going to win some math competition or mathalon or whatever they're called by any stretch of the imagination. He just poured into me as a human being, loving me as a teacher. When our players know that we love them with no hidden agenda, with no, he loves me because I'm a starter, and they see us loving on their teammates and they know their teammates are possibly horrible football players at that point, not only are we blessing their lives there in the present and we're going to help our programs, but we're going to be resources to them their entire lives. And, we all have our different why and why we coach. I'm going to start with the reason that's not mine. One of them, I love the violence of football. I think the game's safer now than it's ever been. But I love the violence of football. I love the chess match, the game planning, the off-season training. But my why, my number one reason is to empower those I coach and coach with. That's it. If I die tomorrow, and I'm making light of it, time and place, coronavirus, getting hit by a car, whatever it is, if my last day is tomorrow, I'll have died knowing that I was one of the greatest coaches I could be, not compared to anyone else, not compared to anyone at any level. But my number one goal is to empower people. And if you love them, I think there's no limit to the lives we can change. I've been blabbering a lot now, so I'm not sure, Justin. I haven't checked the side here. If people have anything, I think your volume might be off because I can't hear you.
Yeah, there's one question here, Coach.
Yeah.
How do you handle with discipline while coaching with love?
Great question. Is that Kellen that had that?
Yes, sir.
Great question. I pause because I think it's the same thing as parents. My wife and I have 4 children and 2 grandchildren now. I taught elementary school for 25 years. I think the easy answer is, you can, when I praise someone, I praise and I'm loud and my veins are popping, I'm animated. When I need to correct someone, I try to have that quiet, private conversation with them and then follow up with a phone call or a text or something afterwards, later that night or whatever. I actually had an incident and I'm still not proud of it. I don't know if I ever will be proud, is not the right word, but in my 25 years coaching, 22, taught for 25. I was a head coach in New Hampshire for 7 years before I came out to California, and I've been a head coach here for 3. So in 10 years I've been a head coach, I've kicked off one young man off of our team, and it was one of the hardest things I had to do ever. Heartbreaking. I was a mess afterwards. In front of my coaching staff, I was like a 13-year-old schoolgirl crying snot bubbles. And it was a young man that was just troubled. And I still to this day think, well, did I help him at all by kicking him off the team? And obviously I won't share his name. There was a lot of comfort from the coaches that had been on staff for years, that had known this young man for 3 years, that said it was the best move. It had to be done. The head coach before me had let him get away with a lot of things. It was kind of a cancer to a program. The long story short, what I did do after that, as far as leading with love, once he was off the team, I requested not to have him back, and I made sure that was established before our meeting. But I was able to meet with he and his mother afterwards. They came in a week afterwards, and I still keep in touch with him now, which I think is a powerful thing because he's several years graduated now, and he knows I reach out to him just because I love him, not for any other reason. So leading with love is always easy when you're coaching young men of character. It's tough when they're coming from abusive or neglectful situations and they need it most. But I think the short answer is just to praise them publicly, loud, and discipline quietly. If that makes sense.
Cool. Coach Davis has a question. What's your philosophy on how you establish your culture? And then what are some ways you try to establishing it weekly?
Great question. Threw me off for a second. My defensive coordinator and assistant head coach is also called Coach Davis. I was like, wait, is that him? He's going to write me out now. So this guy's full of crap. When I first became a head coach out here, is that Coach Davis right there with his son? Is that what you're showing me? It's a great picture there, whoever that is. How do you establish culture? When I became the head coach out here, I was talking to my line coach back in New Hampshire who took over the program when I left. And we were getting our teeth kicked in, just as we had in New Hampshire before not I, but we built a powerhouse. And he asked me, he said, hey, Hines, how long do you think it's going to take before you get to where you want to be. And I laughed and I said, Derek, it's as I mature as a coach, the time question is not a matter of minutes, hours, days, weeks, or years. I truly believe you build culture one person at a time. I truly believe that. We joke around as coaches sometimes about helicopter parents. Well, in the two districts I've been a head coach back in New Hampshire and here in Coronado, my wife and I joke that we don't have helicopter parents. We have Black Hawk parents. They're like helicopter parents, just more expensive, just nicer helicopters. But in all seriousness, I've been blessed over the years where I think it really is 95% of the parents. I'm not saying they agree with the play calling, or that their son's not starting, but 95, if not 99% of them are fantastic and great blessings. And I think the way you get to that, establishing culture, is building relationships with your players one-on-one, just private conversations. And private could be in a crowded gym. I do the strength and conditioning for our programs. I always have for every year I've coached. Part of it is because I love to lift, but part of it is because, like most of us, our practice schedules are to the minute. You got 10 minutes to stretch, you got 5 minutes of this, you got 7 minutes of this, 12 minutes of indie period, whatever it is. So you can connect a little bit, but when I'm able to work out with these guys, these young men year round, it's great because I can pull two guys aside and say, hey, let me join you guys today and work out with you. And other days I might work out with someone else. And having that relationship, that's what builds the culture on a daily basis, and I think year round, in addition to connecting with their families and establishing a relationship with the high school staff. And that comes simply by starting every school year. I email, with permission, the entire staff of the school and say, if you have any questions, if you need any discipline help or anything, please reach out.
Tyler,
We got to
want to call it Do the Five?
Got another question here, Coach. Where to go? How do you handle division within the team?
Yeah, great question. That's an interesting dynamic. I'm blessed with, to be honest with you, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, blessed with right now. At Coronado, we have a diverse community where we have Coronado Island, which is in San Diego. When we're standing on our field, we can see Petco Park and see downtown. But we also have a naval base. So you have a lot of blue-collar families, whether it's high-ranking officials or not, and a lot of kids who have traveled the world. So you have to get those communities to work. A lot of it, I can have blanket comments. And what I mean by blanket is the entire staff and say, hey, listen, we're a family. And that sounds great. But in reality, I have some friends that are closer to me and I'm closer to them than my own family. I'm blessed to be married to my best friend, my wife. But, man, I tell you right now, I almost said something about my own family, not my children. But, well, he won't listen to this. I love my brother. He won't listen to this. But and that's a good thing. We're just different, my brother and I. We're just different in a lot of ways, and we're on opposite sides of the country now, but we don't hang out. So I often tell my team, listen, you don't have to like each other. You don't have to hang out with each other outside of football, but you're going to love each other. And if nothing else, it's going to be out by a mutual respect that you're going through the same thing together and we have a common goal. And that sounds great. Sometimes we've had fist fights on the field, and as a coach, I kind of love that because we need that sometimes. And there's that happy medium where you got to keep it safe and not, we had one this past year where the kids got together, and I finally, after about 15 seconds, went to go step in and separate the two of them. And one was bigger than the other, and one kind of stepped back a little bit, and one went falling back and far. And I thought, thank God he didn't hurt himself. I'd be in prison. I think fighting verbally, physically sometimes is not a bad thing. Sometimes in a controlled environment. I think allowing players to say, hey, listen, you're not going to all hang out after the game. You're not all going to call each other. And to let players know that we don't expect that. But we do expect you're going to love each other enough or respect each other enough to love each other and treat them a certain way. And finally, on this question, I love that question. I always tell the guys, I'm sure I'm not alone, whatever happens on this field ends on this field. We want the character, we want who we are as a program to invade the community, to infect in a positive way the community. But any bad blood we had, we want, once practice or the game's over, we want, when you go in the locker room, that stuff stops and it stays there.
Awesome. Opinion on sports psychology with coaches and players?
It's huge. It's huge. I think the psychology of sports, I think getting into the hearts, more importantly, or just as importantly, the minds of players, is huge. And as we as coaches, we're always trying to improve our game. And I'm sure everyone here, that goes well beyond just the X's and O's. You study some of the greats. Um, you look at Kobe, most recently. When he was alive, a lot of people didn't like Kobe. They thought he was over the top, and a lot of people didn't, respect him to a certain level. And unfortunately, it was his passing that made people really open their eyes and realize what a great human being he was off and on the court. But he was a master at the mental game. You look at Michael Jordan. I remember reading something about Jordan sometime. So many of us, and I try to work on this myself, when we don't meet with someone, or we meet with someone, a parent or someone in the community, we forget their name, we say to ourselves, "Oh, I'm horrible with names." And we keep on feeding that negative mindset. And I read something about Michael Jordan that said every time he's in practice and he misses a free throw, he tells himself, "That's not me. I always make those." And I love that. It's just that mental mindset. It's the sports psychology is huge. And I was actually reached out to by a coach here, a rival school of ours. Their basketball coach actually asked me a few weeks ago to speak to his team. And I was so humbled by that. And I made sure to praise him in front of his players. And I think too many of us in all sports think, hey, it's my team. They just need to hear from me. And there's so much wrong with that. The more our young men and young women can hear from multiple sources and passions and people, the better. So I think that's huge.
How do you intentionally build culture in your program?
Yeah, just the way I intentionally make sure my marriage is a priority. My wife and I have been married for 25 years now, and not I, but we make sure that we have a date night once a week. And we did that when our kids were in diapers. Now they're all 21 and older. And sometimes when we were dirt poor, our date night said, "Hey, let's go to the grocery store together, and we'll go split an ice cream or something." Intentionally building culture is, I got, a lot of the guys not a lot, but some of them, they follow me here on Twitter. Some people might hate me because they're like, "Oh man, he just posted that little stuff, whatever." I post it because that's on my heart, but that's not enough. Putting a poster in our weight room is great, or in the locker room is great, but that's not enough. We've got to live it. So I think intentionally creating culture, the biggest thing, and you go back to tying in leading with love, is we can't demand our players to act and behave a certain way if they don't see us doing the same thing. So it comes down to, practicing what we preach and just living it to the core. And when we mess up, because I mess up all the time, admitting it. And I'm sure not alone, but how many of us have stood, I definitely have, stood in front of our team on a Saturday morning and say, "Guys, I lost that game last night. It was fourth and this, and I called this, and man, that's my bad. That cost us the game." And I would never single a young man out, and I don't ever think a single young man loses a game. But sometimes as coaches, I know I've lost games. So I think that culture of love and empathy and whatever our culture is, we got to live it. We got to practice it.
Question from Coach Hilliard: advice for a coach in his first year coaching, first year post playing.
Yeah, great question. I shared a video on this a while ago. I think our greatest job as coaches is to, in my opinion, once again, this is the gospel according to me, so no one else should be butthurt by this. This is just my opinion. Our job as coaches is to selflessly love and empower those we lead. And one of the biggest mistakes I made my first few years coaching was I wanted to be the cool coach. I wanted everyone to love me. And I'm embarrassed to admit this now, but there's no, I can't remember specific instances, but I'm sure there were times my first year of coaching, even though I was a freshman coach, I was always at the varsity games where the head coach or the OC would call something and the players would be like, "Oh, why do you call that?" And I'm sure I sat there with my arms folded and went, "I don't know. Shame on me." It's just that's horrible in a staff, and I was guilty of it sometimes. I think a first year coach should coach as many positions as they can, with permission and with correct guidance from their head coach. Ask as many questions as they can, and be willing to fail. I think it's great. When I fail as a coach, Monday, or let me back up, Saturday through Thursday, I've gotten to the point in my career where I'm excited about it, truly, because the more I fail Sunday through Thursday, that means I can correct those failures and make it better for Friday night. So I think a young coach, I mean, there's so many different things. It's a great question. I forget who asked this, but be yourself. Don't try to be like any other coach on the staff. Be yourself. Be humble. Ask a lot of questions. But don't try to be people's best friends. You know, more players are going to love and respect you. And I'm not just talking for the year, 2, 3, or 4 they play for you. But I'm talking about when they're married, have their own kids, and when they're depressed, suicidal, lose their job, get a promotion, anything in life that happens to them, they're going to reach out to you and love you and respect you more than ever if they know that you love them enough to not be buddy-buddy with them. I'm all about relationships. I mean, relationships for me is what life is all about. But we don't want to be buddy-buddy at risk of compromising our character and not coaching them the right way.
100%. Coach Colbert, can you recommend any books that you've read that had a big influence on your coaching or teaching?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is I mentioned a little bit earlier is Inside Out Coaching. You know, and once again that book by Joe Ehrman is just it's really a biography, if you will, an autobiography about his life. But he touches on so many gems in that book about being a transformational coach and truly changing lives and leading. You know, I don't know if he uses the words "leading with love," but that's my all-time favorite. But there are so many out there, and you know, one of the things, and I am stealing this from a gentleman from Twitter. I don't remember where I read this, but someone else had mentioned going to clinics every so often of other sports, volleyball, soccer, softball. And I was like, I never thought about that. So I'm going to piggyback on that thought and just say, hey, reading books from basketball coaches or tennis coaches or whatever it is, because so many of us have so much in common, you know, and there's a lot of wisdom and knowledge in football and football coaches. So you can learn some great leadership things from, I mean, look at John Wooden. My goodness, one of the greatest. You know, he's written, and there have been enough books written about him that you could spend several years just pouring into his stuff.
Coach Molinix, I hope I said that right and butcher your name. Do you have a set of values, goals, or keywords that you have posted in your field house or share with your kids that represent the culture of your team?
You know, one key word I've had as every year I've been a head coach has been with the word relentless. And we pour into as a program what that means. Nothing formal, but really what relentless means to them as far as, you know, fighting for what they believe in and what they want. Really coming from Bedford, New Hampshire, where, you know, the brief history was we get our teeth kicked in every single week. Yeah, I joke about it now, but the first year I was a head coach in New Hampshire, we didn't have seniors yet, but at the end of every game, you walk through and shake hands. What does everyone say? Good game. No one even lied to us. Like, we were that bad that people just looked around. They were like, man, this is a beautiful stadium. We were horrible. And then I built a powerhouse where my last 4 years as head coach, we went to the state championship three out of the last 4 years, had 144 players in the program, and we had built something special. Well, I have a grandson. We moved to California, and my first year as head coach in Coronado, that first game, we got our teeth kicked in, and it was the eyes of the players and a few of the coaches that was kind of like, I don't care if I'm here. Now, they weren't saying that, but that was their body language, their eyes, and that drove me crazy. So that was when, for me, the word why, just a simple WHY, became so powerful. And I explained to the players why I'm here, what my passion is, why I want to coach, what it looks like. So yeah, but as far as certain words or phrases or mission statements, I think that's going to come from the head coach. He has got to share that with his staff and be open enough to say, hey, how do you feel about this? Can you adopt this? And be open enough and humble enough to say, let's change a few words or change something, and then share it with the team and try to live it out every day.
Cool. From Coach Randolph, do you have any zero tolerance rules?
No, let me clarify that. I love that. So I hesitate. That's a great question. We have no swearing policy. Let me say, you know, my wife and I have 3 daughters and 1 son, and our oldest daughter, who's 29, she swears like a trucker. I mean, she would make most coaches and or sailors or blush, and she wasn't raised that way. And she has 2 beautiful sons, our grandsons, and she's a business owner. She's an entrepreneur. She's a rock star, but she swears all the time. The reason I share that little bit of information is because I don't think people that don't swear are more intelligent or more anything than anyone else. The reason we do in our program is I don't want to be in a game, preseason, regular season, or postseason, where we have a call that we think is bad and have a coach or a young man get mouthy and have it cost us more. And I don't want to have them go on to their employers get mouthy. So there's a little bit of a life lesson there, but it's not a zero tolerance because they do it. The simple thing is you do 25 push-ups. If a coach swears or a player swears, they do 25 push-ups right there on the spot. I've had players and coaches do push-ups on the sideline. We'll take them off the field, but right there in the middle of the game. But the reason I say no to that, as far as zero tolerance, and I don't think there's anything wrong with coaches that do, is for me, we don't have any players that are all the same. Certain players might look the same, but they all come from different backgrounds. And I think one of the biggest mistakes coaches make is when they play us, for example, is Coronado, man, if you haven't been there, come out and visit. Now, my wife and I live off island. I can afford to coach there. I can't afford to live there. There's some multi-million-dollar homes with more cars than they have drivers. But some of those homes, a lot of them, there's in every home, there's still hurt and pain and heartache. There's neglect, there's divorce, there's abuse. So I think we need to have, when we have a zero tolerance for someone, also take into that equation the fact that we've got to talk to those players. I've heard players say before, or coaches rather, say if a player shows up late, they don't even let him step in the field. They yell at him to go home. Well, what if that kid just got beat by his father? What if he's coming to you and he's only coming to you because you're a man that he looks up to that knows he's not going to raise a hand to him. So before I take a player off the field, I want to make sure I know the reason behind what they're going through, because so often people are battling things that we have no idea about.
That's a great point. From Coach K, when and how do you reflect on yourself to make sure your message is not getting stale, or make sure you're not just rehashing the same message?
Great question. For me, the reflection comes daily through, for me personally, my faith is everything. And I spend a lot of time, with my wife each morning and night praying. And then, gosh, when I'm in the shower, I'm praying. When I'm driving to work, I'm praying. And in that prayer, I often need to just shut my mouth and just listen also and just really reflect. But a big part of that is asking trusted coaches. Depending on the size of our staff, we're going to have certain coaches, just like our players have certain teammates they bond with more. There are several coaches on my staff that I'll seek their counsel, and I'll say, hey, coach, so-and-so, let's chat for a minute. And really, it's an informal evaluation of myself. And I'll preface it by saying, listen, I'm not looking for any single compliments here. What am I doing wrong? What can I do better? There's a lot of value in that. My first year as a head coach, I inherited 3 coaches. 2 of them had played Division I football together. So I got constant feedback every single day. And I didn't ask for any of it, and none of it was positive. It was, coach, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, that sucks. What are you thinking here? Well, you're out of your mind here. And a lot of things I just dug my feet in and said, no, I believe in this. And a lot of things I had to change because they were right. I was doing things that weren't right. So personally, I prayerfully look to make sure my message is what I pray it is daily. But finding trusted people in your program, and like we're doing here with Coach once again, reaching out to people and saying, hey, here's what I do. What do you think?
Absolutely, very important. From Coach Bond, when you have identified players who are leaders in your program, what are some things you are doing to develop or train those guys to communicate your message to the other players?
Fabulous question. So my first few years as head coach, we used to, the very last practice of one season, we would hand in all the equipment, have a team meeting and vote for captains right there and then. And then it would get announced a few weeks later at the banquet. My reason for doing that, and I don't do it anymore, was I wanted to have a year of leadership with them, with those captains, 2, 3, or 4 of them, whatever the number was, and meet with them on a regular basis, talk about leadership. Well, some things happened over the years as I was a head coach, where some leaders captains would really step up in their leadership roles, and some wouldn't. Some would it's kind of like when a young man gets a scholarship. When they get that first offer, some of them, that lights a fire under them, and they keep working harder than ever in the classroom, in the weight room, in everything. And some get that first offer, and they seem like a completely different young man. You're like, whoa, your work's just starting. Like this is just congratulations, but this is just the start of it. And I've had that happen with captains as well. So what we changed this year, and this is the first year, and I like it so far, is we told the players we weren't voting for captains now. I have random leadership council meetings where I'll tell, I usually give 24-hour notice, but I'll say, hey, after weights tomorrow, we're gonna meet in the coach's office. Anyone that wants to come. And the reason I open up to anyone is I might have a freshman in the program that can't put his helmet on straight, that comes to those meetings, but gosh, he might just hear from one person, and maybe not even myself. More importantly, not myself. He might hear from a teammate, something about leadership or culture or something. So we meet with them year round, but I don't email the parents about the leadership meetings. And I did send an original email telling the parents what we were doing, but I said the other announcements of these meetings are going to be just to the players, because I don't want parents saying, hey, so-and-so, you should go to that meeting. If a player wants to be a leader, they'll come to that meeting. And I know I have a lot of players that don't come because they're playing other sports. And I had a few players that would reach out every time I sent out a message. They would text me or Twitter or Instagram and apologize. I'm like, don't apologize. I know why you're not here. You're a baseball, you're a basketball, a track, and that's where you should be. But I try to meet with them year round.
So during the season, how much you guys doing it? Does it obviously in the off season you'll have more time to do things like that? And during the season, how do you structure that?
Yeah, so during the season, I meet with the captains every Saturday morning. Yeah, so at that point, usually beginning of doubles that we will now officially vote for captains, and I'll meet with them formally. We try to do it once a week. Doesn't have to be a Saturday. It could be a Friday before the game. And, I usually wouldn't want to do Friday before the game. Lots on our minds, their minds, things we got to take care of. But I advise meeting with them at least once a week formally, and I tell them, listen, you guys are the eyes, the ears, the heart of the team, because we all know certain players, even the best of kids, are going to act a little bit different when coach isn't around. Even the kids with the highest character might say a few things, and it may not even be derogatory. They just might say some things that they don't feel comfortable or confident in saying to a staff member. So weekly meetings with those captains, it's huge. And just saying, hey, listen, and also giving them a safe space. I tell my captains, what happens in our office, to consider this Vegas. Like, this isn't leaving here unless you share something with me that is broken the law, and I have to. I have to share that. So they know they have a trusted space they can go and share something.
You touched on it earlier with just kids that maybe aren't the easiest to kind of connect with. Yeah. When is it? I don't think you ever truly give up on a kid. I'm not saying that, but obviously you can spend your time putting into student athletes that want to get better and that want to improve and this and that. I guess the question is when do you kind of, not necessarily cut it off, but you're like, hey, you kind of have to draw yourself back a little bit because you're putting all this effort into the person. They're not getting it. They're just kind of being combative with it and not really seeing what you're getting at. And they're kind of just, hey, in one ear and out the other. When do you kind of draw back a little bit?
I had to do that and I know different coaches have logged on at different times, but when I had to kick that young man, first time in 20 years coaching, first time in 10 years as a head coach, when I had to kick him off the team, he was a senior. It was the second day of practice of double session, so we could have helmets on, but couldn't have anything else on yet, couldn't have contact. And we were doing a drill where we were fitting in, so it didn't matter as far as the size of the kid. We're telling everyone, keep everyone on their feet. We're just fitting in, working a little bit of stock block technique. And he just drilled this kid. He just drilled him, laid him flat on his back, and was laughing about it. And I had been doing that for 3 years before I got there. So I pulled him aside, and I'll be real careful once again not to say his name, but I had his face mask was here, and I wasn't grabbing his face mask, but we were close. And I'm like, listen, what's going on? I had a heart-to-heart with him, like, just calm down. Like, just, you're a stud. We're not getting physical now. And he rolled his eyes, he's like, whatever, coach. Now, he'd only known me for less than a month, So next drill, everyone goes through, he comes up again, does the exact same thing, puts him on his back. So I started telling him he had to get off the field, and he told me where to go, use some choice language. And I said, come here for a second. And he threw up a certain finger. It wasn't a thumbs up, and I see certain children here, so it was a thumbs up with a different finger. And I called to him a few times. I'm like, come here. And he's like, I'm done with you. I'm done, And I said, you walk up the field, you're never coming back. And the whole team heard it. As I mentioned, several coaches that coached him for 3 years said, listen, you have to. That's what was done. As I already said, it broke my heart. I was a mess. But because I didn't want to give up on the kid. We talk about we're not coaching players, we're coaching people, young men. I reached out to him, had that meeting with he and his mom, and still keep in touch with him. I think for the betterment of the team, I've had to kick coaches off the program before, out of the program. And sometimes, I hate to use the word cancer, but for lack of better words, if an individual, player or coach, is a cancer to the program, you have to ask yourself, what's the value of keeping this one person around and hurting the rest of the team?
No, for sure.
Right? Yeah, that's a gut check for all of us.
From Coach K said, social media has probably been our biggest headache over the past few years. Do you have a policy, or is there a way you deal with this?
Yeah, I don't use social media. I don't let players use it. I'm never on that stuff. I was waiting for your face. No, it's a funny question because I think social media brings out the best and worst in each of us. I really do. It's kind of like the sports, reveal a character. They don't build character, they reveal character. I believe in that also. We teach our players, in my opinion, once again, that's all, it's my opinion. Social media is like a loaded gun. In the right hands at the right time, it's going to save some lives. It's going to open doors for you. It's going to help you meet people and open up opportunities that maybe would have never presented themselves. In the wrong hands, the wrong time, it's going to cost you a job. It's going to cost you a relationship. It's going to cost you a scholarship. There is that the desire by too many of us, I'm saying us, to post a video trying to praise a young man or young woman and their form's horrible and you're doing more damage because that's not how you should squat or do a clean or whatever it is. I just think we need to, as coaches and players, remind ourselves and each other the power of social media, and how we choose to use that power is up to person.
Kind of freezing up, Coach.
Do we do any team building? Are you still there?
Yeah. Are you back? Are we good?
I'm back, yeah.
Okay.
Were we all off for a second?
I know it's on my end. It kind of skipped up. I don't know for the rest of the coaches, but.
Okay. So I jumped ahead, Coach, down Coach Colbert, if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, I apologize. I said, do we do any team building activities to build camaraderie? We do. Over the 22 years I've coached, we've done things. We've done rope courses before with a New Hampshire, Vermont Shrine team I coached. We've done bonfires, movies. We've done movies in the classroom. We've done movies where we go to the movies as the whole team. We also, my wife is I definitely married up. I think a lot of coaches say we outkicked our coverage. She'll often have her nose in Facebook or whatever and look for opportunities in the community where we've, as a program, gone and laid wreaths before in the National Cemetery. I think any opportunity you have, whether it's to do something for the community or to just bond as a team, the better. And what I love about that is sometimes you see a whole different side of a player that you never see in practice. You really get to know them. You're still in a football setting, so to speak, but because you don't have the pads on and it's more relaxed, I think it's a great way to really get to know your players and know your coaches.
Absolutely. Obviously, and I agree with you. You mentioned just kind of being transparent, which I think is super important. Kind of just showing the players, especially outside of being a coach. You know what I mean? Obviously, as teenagers, they're a little more apprehensive to sometimes open up. So is there anything that you do specifically that you feel like you get them to kind of open up in that aspect? I mean, of course, over time, kids get more comfortable, but I was just curious if there was anything that you did, whether it was sharing things amongst the group or whatever.
Yeah, we as a whole program, often I'll ask questions, during some chalk talk in the classroom, whether it's a Saturday morning after a game when we have, whether we win or lose, a little bit more downtime. I hate to use the word downtime, but a little bit more time, and just ask questions, and you look for leaders to step up and just share answers. We often still and always will talk about our why, and I think that's so powerful because some kids, their why is because they need football to get out of X, Y, or Z. They need it to get out of somewhere, whether it's the ghetto or the ghetto in their mind, or to get out of whatever they perceive is their struggle at that moment in their lives. For some kids, they do it because they just want to be a part of something. You know, they just want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Everyone has a different reason as to why they're doing it. And I think most coaches say we want to make an impact in people's lives. But if we slow down and really get to, hey, but tell me more, and really dig at that, you'll find out the real reasons they want to make a difference in people's lives. Because my parents growing up didn't abuse me. They were always there. They were always present. I was very blessed in that. You know, middle income, very, very much a blue collar family. Did not have anything handed to me, but I was blessed growing up. And I know coaches who want to be the man that they never had in their lives. You know, so there's a lot of different things with that. With the players, I think it's important. It's great to have the whole team conversations, which we do, but also those one-on-one conversations, because I'm very comfortable doing this, and I love this opportunity once again, Justin, so I appreciate it. But I realize now I see your face and we're talking, but there's 10 other coaches or 50 other coaches. You know, I'm not sure if you can see the number here, but
35 right now. There was some more before.
So it's right there. More some right, you know. You wonder, what are they thinking? What are they saying? What are they, you know, what's going on? There's a certain power that comes in speaking one-on-one with a person, you know, especially with our players.
True. Very true. Does anyone else have any questions for Coach? Obviously, he's answered a bunch of guys were asking some tremendous questions in here. So I know Coach does, and I appreciate the guys offering up those questions, man, because, you know, that was certainly insightful for myself.
I appreciate you putting this together.
No, absolutely.
A lot of work.
No, it's been fun. You know, like I said, it kind of started off as just a small little, like, hey, you know, let's talk ball amongst ourselves around here, you know, where I'm at. And then I was like, hey, man, let's reach out to coaches across the country, because, hey, you know, those are I mean, with the ability of technology and social media and stuff, I mean, that's, once again, this is a beautiful part of social media, to be able to connect like this, you know. So here's a question from Jeff. How do you get your faith across?
Well, let me start by telling you about my political views. Just kidding. For me, it's very similar. And what I mean by that is, man, I heard a quote years ago that said people don't mind change. They just don't like being told to change. And there's so much truth to that, you know, for all of us. I'm very open with my faith on social media. And what's great about that is, you know, I can coach at a public school, share my faith, and, you know, not get fired for it. I've had many conversations behind closed doors with my players and their families, where I'll often ask them, hey, let me ask you a personal question. Do you believe in God? You know, and then if they say yes, I'll say, let me, if you don't mind, share something with you. And there have been a few times where they said no. I'll say, well, great, let me go a different direction. And I won't even mention that at all, because you don't want to, you know, force your beliefs on anyone else.
Right.
And an interesting story. I had a young man back in New Hampshire who had busted his knee pretty bad during a game. So after the game, I'm walking up the field with he and his father. And his father goes, Coach, what do we do about Matt's knee? I'm like, well, you saw Eric, our trainer, you know, so take care of that. We'll see him in the morning. We'll take care of getting that, you know, MRI and whatnot. And he goes, anything else? And I said, well, you know, I'll pray for you. And we're walking off the field, and the father and the son stop dead in their tracks, and they look at me with no smile on their face, and they said, we're atheists. I said, well, I will hold it against you. Because I was fairly new to coaching, complete idiot, and could have caused a problem. Fortunately, it didn't. The point of the story is 2 years after the young man graduated, his father had emailed me, went through a pretty tough divorce, and said, the things you would share about your faith really piqued my interest. You know, where do you go to church? He ended up getting baptized. Wow. You know, but I think we have to be careful. You know, and I'm pointing a finger at myself. We've got to be careful not to throw up our faith on people. You know, and be too forward. But at the same time, the world, in my opinion, is I love life. Life is great, but it's a dark place. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of people that are more comfortable putting negativity out there than people that are putting good out there. I don't think we should disguise our faith as anything else. You know, my faith is what it is. But I also know a lot of people who don't believe in Jesus, who are not Christians, who are some of the most Christ-like people I've ever met. And I mean that in the best of compliments. There are some people who don't fit any mold of Christianity or faith at all, but the way they live their lives inspire me. So I think the greatest way to share our faith is just to live it.
Absolutely. Coach, I know you got to get rolling here in a few. We do have another question from Coach Reeves. How do you lead amongst your coaches and get them to buy into your brand?
Transparency. Yeah. When I accepted the head coaching job at Coronado, I was forewarned by the administration. They said, "Hey, coach, you have 2 coaches on your staff." Well, they said, "We think they're going to stay on that applied for the job." One has been here for 18 years. One had been there for like 8 or 9. And I talked to a good friend of mine out here, and he said, "Hey, be careful of those 2. If they stay on staff," and he's an optimist also, but he said they might stay on staff for the right reasons, or they may stay on staff to undermine everything you do and to be a snake in the grass. Long story short with that, my first meeting with them, I was just very transparent. I said, "Guys, if I were you, I'd be pissed. I'd be livid if this jagwagon from the East Coast comes out here, takes the job that you know the program." So I said, "Do me a favor." I said, "I think everyone, all walks of life, has the interview questions, especially in football. What are we going to say? What's football about? It's about character. It's about hard work. It's about fundamentals." I mean, those are the blanket statements. But I'm also a firm believer that the truth always comes out. When the proverbial crap hits the fan, people are going to find out what we're made of. And I asked the coaches, I said, "If you choose to stay on staff," which they all did, I said, "Do me a favor and just give it a year." And I said, "I promise you within 2 weeks of this year, you'll go home to your wives and say, this guy's legit. This guy really is who he says he is." Or you'll say he's full of crap and whatever. And I told him, I said, "This is what we're going to do offensively." I'm kind of more of an offensive-minded guy, I guess. Defensively, I told him what I like, but what I'm open to. So here's what we're going to do: strength and conditioning. Here's our what I want our culture to be and what's going to look like, how it's going to get there. And then I asked them a question. I said, "What's part of Coronado football that you guys don't want to let go of? What's part of your history?" Especially for the guy that's been there for 18 years, who is, by the way, one of the greatest coaches I've ever worked with. Just a great man. He said, "Coach, we need new blood." I said, "But is there something?" He goes, "We need new blood." And then about 2 weeks later, when they had more time to kind of digest everything, he said, "Hey, we always have done this. We've always done this, And there were 1 or 2 things that we added to what we do that have been a huge blessing. So I think the greatest way to get coaches to buy in is to love them also, to love them, to give them a voice and let them coach, not micromanage,
Absolutely. You have time for one more?
Yeah, actually, this is going great. I'm actually good for another 10, 15 minutes, but
Cool.
whatever works.
Cool. Coach Matsumoto wants to know, do you do anything to bond with coaches in and out of season? Also, do you do anything to include coaches' families?
Yeah, great question, Coach, and it's great to see you on here. Yeah, cookouts. I know I'm in the minority with this, but whenever I've been a head coach on the East Coast and now here in California, we don't have coaches meetings on Sundays. I refuse to. For me, Sunday is a family day. Whether you go to church or not, whether you have kids or not, whether you have a spouse or not, I think we all talk about the importance of balance, but we don't preach. We don't practice what we preach. We can do enough breakdown of film Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, or Saturday night, but I think we need to not have our families feel like they take a back seat. I also think it helps. It was easier back in the East Coast for my wife and I to bond with our families because a lot of our coaches were about our age. Now we have some coaches on my staff, our staff. Some are a little bit older, some are younger. We're trying to find that mix. But it's just creating opportunities for families to get together. I think that's huge. Having them over to your house and saying, "We're not talking football." Or what I did in New Hampshire, and what we'll do here as well, is we'll say, "Hey, listen, let's get together. The first 45 minutes, we'll remove ourselves. We're going to be in a different room as coaches. The wives can be wherever they want. But after those 45 minutes, we're not going to talk football at all. Just at all." I think that's huge because, I think that the biggest, the MVP, the most valuable player in all of this is our spouse, because if we're really going to try to raise better young men of character and better husbands and fathers, we have to be better husbands and fathers ourselves. And when our wives feel like they're part of the program, not just in the stands on Friday night hearing all the negative stuff that's said about us, but they really feel connected, that goes a long way.
I think that's always super important. That's something I do in my position group where we'll meet, once during the week, and not talk about football at all. You know what I mean? And I do feel like that's very important because they got to see that it's, there's obviously life beyond the game, and you're someone that's not just about football. You're a man. You got values. You got principles and all that stuff. And for them, I think it shows for the players. I feel like it shows that you care about them more than just how they look in a helmet and shoulder pads. You know what I mean? And all that stuff. So same goes with the coaches. I think that's super important. Does anyone have any other coaches? Any other questions for Coach?
And while they may or may not, but just while the great majority of them are on here, I appreciate all you guys. You guys, more than you may realize, Justin and each of you, make me a better person and coach because, I'm constantly learning things and picking up things. And as you mentioned, through the blessing of social media, I think so many of us are connecting with coaches we would have never crossed paths before. We're talking about coaches from East Coast, West Coast, as far south as you can get before. We're 5 minutes from the border here in Mexico. And I know some coaches up there in Washington State and Oregon, wherever. It's fantastic. So thank you.
That was great. I mean, that's kind of why, I usually start the meetings like that just to see where everybody's calling in from and tuning in from. I think it's really cool. So we appreciate every coach that's checked in to the session and all the sessions that we've been having, man. It's been a lot of fun. And this is exactly why we do it, because clearly having to be able to sit in here and listen to Coach Hines and all the coaches, everybody who's got a chance to do that, whether it was 10 people in there, 20, 50, those people got better in some aspect. And that's the name of the game right now. We're looking to get better. And, I believe I speak for everybody in here that we totally got better after this talk. And we appreciate Coach for taking the time out to do that. So, thank you very much, Coach. Seriously.
Can I add with one final thing?
100%.
One thing.
Take your time.
And mean this from the bottom of my heart is guys are going to hear this again. If you've been here a full hour, you can click off now if you want. 'Cause I'm going to repeat myself, but I'm truly humbled to be here because we're all learning from each other, and I don't claim to know more than any of you guys. And as Justin just mentioned, we can take one thing away from this, or I can take one thing away from what you guys share or post or put out there, and touch a young man's life in a way that blesses them. Man, I truly believe football coaches are going to change the world. So I appreciate each of you guys.
Amen. Absolutely. So, Coach, I think I'm pretty sure most people do, but how can they connect with you on social media?
Facebook's the only one that is not Coach Kurt Hines. Too many of my high school buddies that I played with give me a hard time about that. So it's just Kurt Hines. But Instagram, Twitter is Coach Kurt Hines. And I've got a website, I guess, that my family put together. But Coach Kurt Hines is where they can find me.
Yeah, obviously, like I said, I believe, I go on a lim and say just about, everybody is following you on here. But if you're not, please do, because the same information and the same gems he was dropping in here, man, he posts very frequently on his page, man. It's something that as coaches who follow him, or just anybody who follows him, I think it's something that people look forward to because it's just always valuable information. And most importantly, and this is just my opinion, most importantly, I think the best part about it is it comes from the heart, and you can hear the passion in it. You can hear just how much he cares about that stuff, and I think that is priceless. And he's authentic, he's genuine. And once again, make sure you're following him, please. And just for everybody else, once again, like every meeting, man, drop your Twitter handle in there so we can follow each other and we can connect. It's a great opportunity for us as coaches to take advantage of this time, and let's make the most of it.
I appreciate you, Coach. Each of you guys, you're a blessing. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it. I'll leave this chat up for a few just so people can see certain Twitter handles if you want to follow anybody. But once again, Coach, thank you for your time. Tremendous talk.
Yeah. And if there are any coaches on here that do follow me that I don't follow back, please send me a private message and say, hey, wake up, coach, follow me or whatever. 'Cause, you know, sometimes for all of us, certain handles fall through the crack, whatever. I'll make sure I'm following you guys back. So appreciate it.